Hi everyone, this is Meet Them Mondays. I'm here with Gabby, with JP, and with Lina. This is our climate change episode. Tune into joeradio.org if you want to hear the live recording or the audio better. After on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. In the meantime, enjoy the show and stay tuned. I'm like, you guys can all wave.
Oh, I wave.
We happen to find ourselves alive during this full of activity. There's things going on all the time. Now we have greater access to seeing them happen in front of us. It's confusing and sometimes painful. But in the end, love sets it all free. Let's love. It's the only answer. From the soul, y'all.
Welcome to Meet Them Mondays, a show about community, culture, and lifestyle in Miami. I'm your host, Cristian Portilla, and tonight I'm in the studio with John Paul Mejia and Gabriela Rodriguez of the Cleo Institute and Lina Castañeda of Surfrider Foundation. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Let's go around and have you each introduce yourselves and what the role is at the foundations that you represent. And JP, we can start with you first.
Okay, cool. Thanks. I'm John Paul, or JP, you can call me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm one of the lead organizers at the Cleo Institute's GenCLEO youth program. So I do lots of things with other young people. I advocate for policy that's progressive on climate from our local and federal leaders. And I also get kids educated and engaged in climate science and climate policy.
Awesome. And what is the Cleo Institute for people out there?
So the Cleo Institute is a non-partisan, non-profit organization that's based here in Miami, and it was founded around 10 years ago to give ordinary people like you and I that live in this community and communities now around Florida an opportunity to lead and be educated on climate science and climate policy.
Yeah, founded by Caroline
Lewis, none other than Caroline
Batty.
Lewis. Batty for sure.
Gabby?
Yeah, so my name is Gabby. I am a program intern at the Cleo Institute. I'm also a college student at FIU, studying environmental science and sustainability. As an intern at Cleo, I help launch and I'm helping to develop our school's program. So right now we are entering high schools and we are teaching high school students about climate science and empowering them to build initiatives and take action on a local level. In addition to that, I help with GenCLEO, our youth advocacy group, and me and JP are also starting a podcast with Cleo.
Yes, awesome. I was just going to say that, so thank you for bringing that up. Do we have a name for the podcast yet?
We do. It's called House on Fire. We have our pilot ready. We are not launched officially yet, so make sure you follow Cleo on Instagram and Twitter, our website, cleoinstitute.org, to stay tuned.
Awesome. And Lina?
Well, I do a bunch of little different things. First and foremost, I am a mom of two, and I work for Surfrider currently. It's all volunteer work. Surfrider is a foundation that started in 1984 in California, and it's been in Miami since 1997.
Okay.
The position that I hold right now is Rise Above Plastics coordinator, and I help help people understand like the dangers of plastic pollution and that sort of thing. This is one of the programs of many programs that Surfrider has actually. Another one is it's called Blue Water Task Force, which is testing the waters of our coast, and we just want to make sure that we have clean water to swim in. And other programs that we also have is like restoring the dunes for the beaches, and youth programs like what you have in Cleo Institute as well.
Awesome. And you're also a podcaster. Do we have a name for your podcast?
It's just an extension of my blog, what I've been doing for a while. My blog is minimalina.com, and through my social media I kind of help people understand some things about sustainability, mostly in the life of
A minimalist.
Yes, exactly, and also like a family setup.
Yeah.
And so the podcast is an extension of that as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you all so much for the intros. Before we begin, I want to take a second to bring attention to a few events that are happening in our community. The first one is obviously a Cleo Institute event. The Cleo Institute is hosting the Youth Climate Emergency Leadership Training along with climate mobilization. And it's a one-day free training to get everyone you know and everyone you love to learn the skills needed to encourage our county to respond to the climate crisis. And it's happening this Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday. Don't at me. For more information, obviously make sure to check out the website, the Cleo Institute website, and the information will be on there. And then there's also a free climate action dinner happening on February 8th in collab with MIT, and it's the first of a monthly series aimed at connecting local leaders in business and science and in policy and also in culture, really. So they're going to be hosting this dinner series where all of these people, essentially even us like in this room, are going to get together and discuss, you know, climate action and things that are regarding policy, maybe things that we can do, and pretty much galvanize everyone that's there. So for more information on that, check out the bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/climatedin, DIN, to RSVP to the free event. So that's both of those. And then Gabby, you had an event that's actually happening a little bit further down in March that you wanted to mention. So
Yeah, definitely. So every year the Cleo Institute hosts an annual climate symposium. And this year we're focusing our climate symposium on climate and health, so the impacts that the climate crisis will have on human health. We are bringing in health professionals from all around, and it's going to be in partnership with the UM Miller School of Medicine.
yeah.
It's on March 28th, it's a Saturday, and we will have tickets going up next week, so make sure to follow Cleo and go to our website. It's going to be really cool.
Awesome. So let's just get right into it, because this is a very broad question, but I always ask myself, how did we get to where we are right now? And we were talking about this before the show. South Florida is also the ground zero for sea level rise. We see it happening all the time with the king tides. When it rains a little bit too much than it should, we're getting flooded. And this was something that started becoming as like a question that started coming up for me more and more. So essentially, do we have an answer to maybe how we got here right now? And JP, like on a macro level, can you explain like how did all this start happening the way that it is and the sense of urgency that we see now more and more about climate?
Yeah, sure. So climate is a very sensitive thing. Climate isn't like the weather. Climate is something that we measure on long term, and we take into account temperature and precipitation, the amount of rain, when we measure climate. And when I say that climate is sensitive, I mean that it can be lightly impacted by very small things. And in order to understand why we are in what we are right now, we really have to understand the basics behind how the climate works. So every planet is made up of an atmosphere, and life on Earth as we know it is happening and is possible because of the kind of atmosphere we have. So we have an atmosphere that provides us with a perfect Goldilocks temperature, and we owe that to the greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse effect is basically this natural effect that keeps the Earth a steady temperature. And the greenhouse effect, it keeps us warm because we have this little part of the atmosphere that's filled with greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases basically are just, in short terms, gases that trap heat. So one of these gases is carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide happens naturally. We breathe out carbon dioxide when we breathe, and lots of Earth's natural systems create and take in carbon dioxide. However, we have seen a lot of carbon dioxide levels increase because of human activity. And the majority of that human activity is the burning of fossil fuels. So when I say fossil fuels, I mean the burning of oil, coal, and gas. So back in the 1800s, we underwent the Industrial Revolution, the second Industrial Revolution, and we started furiously and crazy amounts burning these gases. And again, these are heat trapping gases. So they started accumulating in our atmospheres, and Well, now we have a warming climate, and this is due to a small number of corporations burning a lot of gases. And again, since our climate is now heating up, we're dealing with things like extreme weather events, hurricanes, wildfires, floods, and you name it. Thing is, it's going to go beyond that, you know. It's going to impact, it's going to give us droughts, which are going to reduce the amount of food in countries. It's going to lead to crop failures, and that's really scary, because it becomes not just a matter of, hey, let's protect the planet. It's more, hey, let's protect ourselves, because we're dealing with threats to our water and our food and our very own safety. And that's due to the mistakes that were made by very few people, unfortunately, putting millions, billions of lives at risk for economic profit.
Just to add to the urgency of the climate crisis, so to put it in perspective, for millennia, our planet has been at a concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere under 300 parts per million. So we've had fluctuations in our level of carbon dioxide. We've had fluctuations in our global temperature over the last 800,000 years since we've been recording, since we can go back and record carbon dioxide. But we've seen, to put it in perspective, that in the last 70 years, we've managed to go from the stable 300 parts per million to now, today, we're at 412 parts per million in the atmosphere. So that means in 70 years, we've managed to break that constant stability over millennia. In 70 years, we've managed to add an additional 112 parts per million. So essentially, we, like JP was saying, greenhouse gases trap heat. Just imagine that our atmosphere is a thicker blanket. So I'm wearing a sweater right now to kind of stay warm in an AC room, but if I were to put on 2 more sweaters, I would just get hotter and overheat. Right. And that's pretty much what's happening with our atmosphere right now. Our planet is just heating up.
Right. So I love the way that you guys broke that down for us, because really it makes so much sense. And so when we start having these conversations, I think that a part of the reason why people get intimidated speaking about climate is because it seems like a lot more complex and a lot more broad than what it really has to be. So if I wanted to have these conversations with my friends and I want to talk to them about these things, what are some of the terminology, what are some of the things that I should get familiar with? One of those that I kept reading and kept coming up for me was single-use plastics, and how single-use plastics are so bad, and I'm reading this all over the place. So all of a sudden I'm all worried about single-use plastic. Is this single-use plastic? What should I do with my garbage? And I start questioning these things. But I don't know if it's me just seeing this all the time, or is a single-use plastic one of the plastics that are very responsible for what's happening. You get me? Is single-use plastic maybe that one thing that we should blame?
It's
or
the most in your face, I guess, physical part of the issue that it's always with you, or really right in front of you very quickly. But it definitely, that is part of the problem, not only because of the way that it's produced, where it's coming from. Plastic is coming from fossil fuels, and like you were saying, it's being extracted, and the burning of that and the process of creating all these plastics is what's also adding to the raise of the carbon dioxide. And but also the afterthought of the plastic, where does it go, right? So we have all this plastic that's, if it's not being recycled, which by the way also causes a lot of pollution in the way that it's processed. Yeah, I mean, think about it. You gotta have all these trucks picking up the recycling. You gotta keep up all these ginormous plants to process it. And then you gotta, the process of the plastic, taking it down, melting it again to create other things is also a huge other process. So it takes up a lot of energy. You have trucks, you have, cars that are going there all the time. So I think that's the whole process of this plastic is just from beginning to end. It's just really impossible to.
Yeah, I was reading that a plastic that you consume once, in one way, shape, or another, it still exists. It's been broken down into different pieces, or into smaller things, but that one plastic that you consumed, from whatever time you consumed it, is still present in today. Yeah. And the reason why single-use plastic was such a big deal is because of the way that it technically breaks down by not breaking down. It gets into smaller
and it gets worse.
And it gets worse.
Yeah, as it breaks down and becomes microplastics, it's actually more detrimental to our health as it enters fish and then eventually our own bodies and different parts of our Earth system. You know, I read somewhere that we're actually now finding the chemicals in plastics in women's breast tissue. And they're now a little bit worried about how it's going to affect maybe the embryos of pregnant women now.
I think it's being found now in like umbilical cords, which is insane because that's where the baby gets fed from.
Right.
And not only that, but if you consume something that's really enthralled in plastic, plastic actually mimics your hormones composition, right? So your brain thinks you have these hormones and starts acting in a different way
Let me
than
tell
it
you,
should.
I know this sounds weird, but I promise you that there's been times that I sweat, and I kid you not, I feel like I smell like plastic when I'm sweating. I know that sounds so random, but there's been times where I'm like, dude, why does it smell like plastic? Like, why do I smell this stuff? Like, why does the water smell like a plasticky smell? Like, you know, bottled water, like how when it sits there, it smells like that plastic, or you taste something and it tastes like plastic. So
when the bottle is like exposed to the sun or like a lot of light for a while, it definitely releases toxins, and that water definitely has like some sort of particle of plastic in it. Like
Photodegradation.
Yes.
that's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a conversation that we should be having with like retailers and people that we shop from, and where we get our single-use plastic, because it's usually always from what we consume. Like, what conversation should we be having with retailers? Who do we have to go and be responsible and be like, sir, ma'am, owner of these companies, like, we want to consume your product, we just don't want to consume the plastic that it comes in. Like, how can we have these conversations? I know that's broad as well, but like, how do we begin to hold these people accountable? Because it's also like holding the corporations, the businesses accountable, but also policy. So how do we get there? What do we ask for? How do we request that change from them?
I think first it needs to come from the community, or you know, the consumer, because us as consumer, I don't think we are very aware of how much power we have against these companies. But if you stop consuming a certain product, the product's probably not going to be made in such a mass production matter, right? So I think it starts on the consumer creating or some sort of culture that starts using reusable bottles. And then beyond that, at a government level, kind of like what Miami Shores did very recently, is provide their community a way to for example, they removed the plastic bottles from the village property, Miami Village property. They're not allowed to sell the plastic bottles starting I think it's 120 days from last Tuesday. And in exchange for that, they're gonna take care of the water fountain, so people have, you know, they have water available to them. And I think that's the part of the equation for the solution, right? Like, the government is seeing that these changes are necessary, but also providing the solution for their community to be able to use your water bottles that are reusable.
And you were talking the other day at the village of Miami Shores.
I did. I actually got really inspired by people like you guys that come and
JP
talk to,
and
like,
Gabby,
you guys go up there and you say what you need to say to the people that need to hear it. Like saying it, for me to say it to people that follow me is not enough, and definitely talking in some sort of body of government is really important.
I love that you did that, and you basically just went in there. It's on your social media, and you were telling them, like, this is what I feel about.
And it's not hard, right? Anybody can do it, and everyone should do it. Like, you can just show up, and all these people showed up from the village, and they had their peace of mind, and that's, anybody can do it. So.
And JP, which I wanted to lick a little. Because tomorrow, well, tell us about what's going to be happening tomorrow, and yeah,
sure. So I'll kind of ease into it based on what kind of advocacy the climate groups here in Miami are doing. So we feel that the first step in terms of policy and governmental action, the first step, a baby step that governments need to take in order to address the climate crisis and the urgency it needs, is to declare climate emergencies. So what climate emergencies are statements pushed forth by local or state or federal governments that basically say, hey, public and governments around the world, we as a government are addressing that climate change is not only real, but we have to tackle it right now. Therefore, we need to prioritize it as an emergency. And that emergency is going to require money that we need to spend in order to ensure our residents' safety and adaptability and ensure that we can start moving away from emitting carbon dioxide. So not only does it speak truth to power in terms of the climate science and the sort of urgency that we need, but it also educates the public on straying away from the argument that whether climate change is real or not.
Yeah.
And we really need governments to not only take this step towards declaring a climate emergency in order to educate their residents, but also to hold themselves accountable for when we come back and they might act in a favor that isn't for the environment or isn't for the climate, and we say, hey, you declared an emergency though, why are you not acting like it? So it's a bold first baby step in terms of policy when addressing climate. So we've been working on campaigns of climate emergencies throughout this past year, and we were able to get some of the biggest municipalities of our county to declare climate emergencies, like City of Miami Beach, and Surfside. And tomorrow, actually, we'll be hearing from the City of Coral Gables, and it seems like we're going to have a pretty promising forecast.
Seems like they will declare, but obviously, we still have people come out and speak, because the beauty of like going to these meetings and having a declaration of climate emergency is that kids our age, the people who inherit this planet, the people who frankly will inherit the climate crisis, and the generations after us, have the opportunity to go up for 2 minutes and speak.
Yes.
And there's so much power to that I mean, JP, I feel like you have realized that and you use that to your advantage for a long time now. But like on a personal note, I really did not understand until like this past year.
Yeah.
But there's so much power to be civically engaged and to go up there and be like, look, this is the problem and this is what we are asking you to please consider, because like this is our future.
Yeah.
So that's happening tomorrow and we're super excited.
Yeah.
And we're still working on more declarations, hopefully especially the county. We want a county-wide declaration.
We also participate in a lot of strikes for climate and demonstrations and rallies for climate that are supposed to galvanize governments into performing actions. And one of our biggest actions was geared toward City of Miami Beach on September 20th, which almost immediately thereafter declared a climate emergency unanimously. And City of Miami, which was at first a little bit reluctant, or we weren't on the same page about passing this climate emergency, ended up, because we built so much pressure, not only passing this unanimously, but just a couple days ago, Mayor Francis Suarez actually signed the C40 agreement to promise to make Miami carbon neutral by 2050. Wow. So these are very, very big gains that the youth is speaking to. The youth isn't really living by the words that are fed to us anymore.
Yes.
We just want our futures insured, and we're being unapologetic while we're asking for it, and it seems to be working, so we're continuing the fight.
Love that.
Yeah.
Congrats, guys.
I think the incredible part about the youth movement right now is that, yes, individual actions are needed, and they build a mindset in a person that the environment is something we should protect because we are a part of it. No matter what you say, we are a part of the environment. But the great thing about the youth movement is that ultimately we understand that the root cause of the climate crisis is really just the burning of fossil fuels. It's simple is probably not the right word to use, but for the lack of a better word, it's as simple as that. It is the burning of fossil fuels, and we don't have much time to end our burning of fossil fuels before we set off these catastrophic tipping points on our planet.
Mm-hmm.
And what the youth is doing is taking that simplicity and just running with it and talking to their elected officials locally, on a state level and federally, and saying, look, we're asking you to divest now, shift to renewable energies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it carries an even more powerful message that it's coming from young people. It's kind of like, hey, supposedly people who supposedly know better than us, which is why you're sitting in power, we understand this. Why don't
yes,
you?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that I was at brunch yesterday with our friends, and I consider myself the youth too, but as like a big sister of you guys of the youth, right? And high school, and seeing people your age, right? Because we were talking about it, and we were talking about like the show and like the difference of generations, and like my friends, we were all sitting at the table, and we're like, we ain't shit. Like these kids are like, they're so dope, and like I love, because I feel too like I am so proud of having you two as youth. I know, Lina, you share the same sentiments. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
We're so proud of people like you guys, because we almost feel like we support that, and we're like, yeah, like if you guys are standing there, like we have your backs, like right there with you, because I think about it too when I'm thinking about the planet, and I don't have children yet, but I'm thinking about like your children's children, and then eventually my children's children, who's gonna come after you guys.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people dismiss the youth, and they're like, oh, they're on their phones, oh, they're this, they're that, and I'm like, you guys got it all messed up. They're on their phones, but they're on their phones
using it for advocacy.
They're using it for advocacy.
I'm so glad that you just said, like, we're right there with you, we support you,
Yes.
because and JP can agree with this, I'm sure, but a frustrating part about student advocacy is the praise, in a sense, right? Like the thank yous and the we're so proud of you, it's great, but all the youth is really asking is for support and for words that are not empty.
Yes.
And
Right.
it's great to hear from adults, we're so proud of you, awesome, keep it up, but it's not that we expect to take this on our own. We're asking for your help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want to be going to commissioner meetings or leading strikes and have it just be only youth. That's not the
Yes.
point of this.
Mhm.
It just happens to be that we're the ones starting it,
Yep.
and that's because it's it's most existential to us. But we need people of all ages to also join. So when people say like, we're so proud of you, this is so great, help us join.
Yes.
It's a good cause. Please join.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. And like I was telling you earlier, like I had the sense of urgency to host you, all three of you, and especially you two as youth, because I feel like a lot of people that are in our age groups, or at least in my immediate age group and my friends and stuff like that, we all feel that sense of like, we support you guys, we're proud of you guys. I at least for one speak for myself that I I do support actively, but we were also saying like we're at a point where we have other responsibilities and other things that have taken like more priority in our lives, but we want to know, because we want to, now we have maybe more disposable income, maybe more time that we could put our resources back into you guys. And if I'm at my 9 to 5 but you have time and I can donate, or I can support you, or have a platform to have these conversations, whatever it is, like I want to do that for, and I don't mean me as in Cristian Portilla, I mean the people my age and this age group wants to do it for you guys. The problem is sometimes, again, it's just that we feel like it's this big broad thing that we don't know about, and it's simple as like, hey, let's have a conversation, let's everyone have a seat at the table and discuss, like, from my perspective, what worries me, and you tell me what worries you.
Right.
And Lina, I kind of wanted to go back to something that we were talking about earlier, and also how the village of Miami Shores is now like getting rid of like the
plastic water bottles.
plastic water bottles. And one thing that we had talked about earlier was climate gentrification, right? And how climate gentrification is something that is like of privilege, and I was like trying to understand why that would be. So maybe Lina, explain to us what climate gentrification is, and then we'll get into that discussion.
Sure. Okay. So more specifically, what climate gentrification is the displacement of lower income communities due to the fact that they're in areas that are not at a sea level rise warning area.
Lower elevation.
Yeah.
Exactly. So some of those areas are Liberty City, for example, in Little Haiti, and they're being kind of pushed out of their communities because now they're doing all these developments and they're selling the homes to people that want to move there.
Because they're like technically in safer zones.
Because they're in
Yeah.
safer zones, it definitely floods less during king tide.
Yeah.
And so I actually live in Little Haiti, and I've been there for almost 4 years now.
Yeah.
And so I'm like in a weird place to talk about this because I also live in there, and obviously, well, me with my family of 4, we're not trying to push out anybody of Little Haiti, but at the same time, I think has a little bit to do with the housing crisis that's happening in Miami. We were no longer able to afford any kind of rent anywhere where we were before, like Edgewater and that sort of thing. So with our family growing, we decided to purchase a relatively cheaper home, and that happened to be in Little Haiti, and definitely our costs of living are way less. And so I'm like, it's like, if it's not one thing, it's the other. Yeah. But then with climate gentrification also, and the privilege thing that we were talking about, I'll go back to that, is that we are definitely privileged when we become these like eco warriors that we were talking about, because we can afford to maybe buy something to create our own milks, or avoid the plastic bottle for certain things. And it is definitely something that is a privilege because you have the money to do that. But if you're not, and you're in a low income community, you can only afford certain things that unfortunately already come in plastic.
Yeah, and you can't shame people for that. Yeah.
Exactly, it's survival versus trying to be sustainable. So of course, that's more important to them. So that's where kind of the privilege kind of.
Yeah, and Gabby, you get.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that I think in both of those examples, it's very interesting to see how we can start looking at the rooted systemic problems behind all of these things. I mean, when you talk about the privilege of being eco-friendly, why has our society developed in a way that it only favors those who are more affluent to be sustainable? That's not, we should all live equally sustainable. But even going back to climate gentrification, you start seeing the intersectionality of the crisis, even in a case study as small as Miami. And it goes back historically to reveal different injustices that have been sprouted by those people who have fueled climate change, but also, give us like a foreshadowing of how the climate crisis will exacerbate injustices that we already see within our community. So you spoke about Little Haiti and Liberty City. So when we look back in history, these high elevation areas that are now being searched for by developers were not looked for at first at all. These in this high elevation part, which is known as a coral ridge, there was a railroad built while Miami was industrializing. And basically what the racially oppressive processes of zoning, like redlining and whitewashing did was locate a bunch of low-income communities of color along these railroad tracks so they could supply cheap labor and bad working conditions in order to build these railroads, right? So, okay, these low-income communities of color settled on this and provided cheap labor. Obviously, they were subjected to poorer air quality, poorer water quality, and that brings up the issue of environmental racism. Lots of brown and black people are subjugated to a worse quality of life environmentally. Okay, but regardless of that, these communities actually prospered. We have Little Haiti being an emblem of Miami's culture, prospering. But we fast forward and we see these communities, many of which are climate refugees, under attack again by many of the corporations that deny climate change. And again, that puts them in a vulnerable place. They're now on sacred ground that is being is scarce because of its benefits, and these are the people once again suffering. So the question is, are systemically oppressive processes made this crisis in the first place, and even now, knowing that they've made these problems, they are subjugating the oppressed even more to the effects that are coming of this crisis.
And he hit the nail on the head, but this is exactly why when it comes to advocacy, whether it's a student or it's somebody later in their life, we need proper representation of POC, of gender.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Anything. We not do we just need it, but it would be an injustice to not have it. Because if we're going to go out there and speak about climate change and why we need to divest from fossil fuels, and we're just representing this, white male cis model, that's not representative at all of the majority, and not only the majority, but the people who will be affected the most by the climate crisis. Just to give you more insight on how Miami is like this poster child of climate injustice, in addition to climate gentrification, we're going to see with saltwater intrusion. Saltwater intrusion, if you don't know, is like the contamination of our fresh water with salt water as sea level rises. We're going to see that our freshwater drinking supply will get more expensive. And who do we think that's going to impact more, frankly? Lower wealth communities. And then another example that's really important that a lot of people might not see is extreme heat. Miami is already really hot.
Yeah.
And we actually don't require AC units in our public housing. And so many people here in Miami depend on affordable housing. So how can we expect in 2050, when 1/3 of our year is going to be above 105 degrees Fahrenheit, that these people are not going to have health hazards? They will. So from extreme heat to saltwater intrusion to where you live on elevation, the climate crisis is a human rights crisis. It's totally disproportionate.
Absolutely.
So how can we start getting involved now? Like, what do I need to do to use my voice, to use me, my friends, my mom, my sister, like our immediate networks, and galvanize these people to say, okay, we know what the problems are. This is how we're going to move forward to a solution. Like,
you need to speak truth to power. And that starts off with conversations that can be bold, you know. Our elected officials are people, just like you and I. In fact, it is their job to be representative of the people. And if they are listening to oil lobbyists, and if they are listening to corporations that fund their campaigns more than the people, then you can ensure them that when the next election cycle comes around, they will not have your vote, and they will be ousted for a candidate that will listen to the climate, that will listen to the science, and that will listen to the urgency behind what this crisis needs. But not all of us have the privilege to vote. Some of us, a lot of people in our community, don't have the proper documentation, or they are just residents, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a voice, because it may not, quoting someone in power, be part of this country, but they are part of this world, and they damn sure have a right to see how their futures will be and how their children's future will be. So we need to start having bold conversations unapologetically with our supposed leaders and stop them from acting like children while children are the ones acting like leaders. That is the first step. We have to be conscious not only of our actions, but also of the actions of those who supposedly represent us.
so when there's and I'm gonna do a slow clap for that one. Yes. So when there's meetings, or when the Cleo Institute is having an event, or when there is a how do you, like, no huelga, pero like a strike.
Yeah.
We show up, we go, we represent, we talk, we speak to the media. Like, what are actionable things that we can do? Like, what's something coming up that I can go to, that my friends can go to, that we can show this, show our voices, our presence?
Yeah, so definitely everybody gets into this differently. It starts with what JP said, having real conversations, and then real conversations might lead you to being interested in a climate advocacy group, such as GenCLEO, such as Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, whether that be through social media or however else you get your media, and you connect. From there, you're probably going to find out more about different strikes, about different commissioner meetings happening, and from there, you learn more activities that involve civic engagement that is doing what JP is explaining. You reach out to your elected officials. So when I say activities of civic engagement, writing letters to your elected officials, calling your senators, telling them, look, I'm not happy about oil drilling in our state and this and that. It's about becoming civically engaged, and everybody approaches it differently, and the Cleo Institute is one of many organizations that you can become involved. So Cleo, kind of just to tie it back to Cleo, we as an organization have several community programs where we go and we educate the community on climate change. We go over the science, the impacts, and the solutions, and then we focus on the factor of civic engagement, because the ultimate goal is to not just educate whoever we're speaking to, but to empower them to take those civic engagement steps, like I just mentioned.
For follow through.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And bringing me back to my original point. That's why I feel like everybody just enters this a different way.
Yeah.
Personally, like, I didn't exactly come out of high school planning to want to pursue climate science or climate activism.
Yeah.
But I just realized there's no bigger environmental problem. Like,
Right.
I need to get into this. So I got involved with CLEO, and that's what led me here. But for anybody who's listening and wants to get involved with advocacy, find a local group, find a local chapter, come to a CLEO event, and you will learn about the climate crisis, and I promise you will feel empowered enough to feel like you need to get up and do something, whether it's the smallest thing as calling your senator for 5 minutes or coming to a commissioner meeting and speaking for 2 minutes.
Like Lina did too.
Like
Right.
a job.
So
Lina
I just wanted to say that I was so inspired
Yes.
by your speech. I was
Yes.
like, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you guys are doing this because you're the next generation of leaders for my kids.
Yep.
I have a 5 and a 1-year-old, so I'm like, yes, absolutely. And
But Lina, you
So,
too. 'cause-
well, so I'm gonna share this because I was completely scared of being in that podium just reading like this like paragraph that wasn't didn't have any substance. It was just like, do this, plastic is bad, okay, amen, or whatever, and I left, and I was so nervous. But in doing that, I think I was hoping to inspire other people my age. I'm actually 31, so I think I'm the older one here. But people that are my age and that are not into this, like, let's go strike and be with all these young people because it might seem a little bit intimidating. There is a program from Catalyst Miami that helps you about climate resiliency. It's a climate resiliency program that's about 12 weeks, and you go about once a week. And they teach you how to how to reach out to your elected officials, how to write to them, and how to reach out with a really good story to get your point across. Because some people go there and they're just like want to yell and then they're not being heard. But so there's a process to that as well that I had no idea how it worked, and I actually had no idea how like our elected officials. Like what the meetings were about, and there's an agenda, and like all of that is like very basic stuff that
they break it down for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I had no idea. So Catalyst Miami, the climate resiliency program, I think it's starting in a couple of weeks in by Miami Gardens, and they do that a couple of times a year, and I highly recommend it because I was like, I don't know what to
does
say
that
about
too? The new Florida majority.
Yeah.
The new Florida majority is so dope. I've announced their events on here too, because they had a program on the 25th that was teaching people if they wanted to get into politics, like, and specifically POC people, right? Because there's a language, there's a tone, there's a way. We have this passion, but you have to polish that, right? So it gets along to the masses, and it was a free event, and it's like these events are out there in our community. It's a matter of us looking for them and getting connected to each other. Like the moment we start connecting these dots and connecting our networks together as people, like it makes me excited and happy to know that I'm gonna go to these places and I'm gonna be welcomed, and that I'm gonna find more like-minded people.
Yeah, and like when it comes to being welcomed, I feel like a lot of people might also be hesitant to becoming civically engaged or whatever you want to call it, politically active, because they feel like they don't know enough about the issue.
They feel like nothing happens.
That's what I was also, yeah, exactly. There's actually research that's come out that the main reason people do not go out and become politically active is because they don't feel like anything's going to come out of it.
Yep.
And what's so ironic about that is that the reason we don't have climate action on a federal level is because we have government inaction. And we won't have government action until we have a greater public opinion on climate change. We need to foster a strong public opinion, and that public opinion doesn't exist because people are not engaged, because like you said, they feel like it's not going to work. It's not that people, this is maybe a personal note, but it's not that people don't believe in climate science in this country. It's just that, because people do, it's just that, one, they might not understand it, and they don't feel like what they can do will matter anyway. But it obviously does. We've seen it. JP and I are working on this, and municipalities have declared climate emergency.
And you pull the receipts, and tomorrow
Yeah. So anyway, as I was saying, I just feel like, obviously, with people feeling it's not going to work, it's also that people, and I feel like this is important to note, people might also feel like they're hesitant to go out because they feel like they don't understand the topic well enough, and they don't want to be grilled on something, or they don't want to not know a fact. And it's not about that at all. Like you said, all it takes is a personal story, knowing the basics of the issue you're talking about. You don't need to be an expert on this, because we don't need experts. Like, we don't need the perfect environmentalists. I always say, like, we just need people trying their best and coming out here and having these conversations.
Yeah. And another, like, Gabby and I totally nerd out sometimes about, like, research and stuff like that, whether it be science or whether it be the politics of it. But there's this, I forget which university, but she's a professor. Her name's Erica Chenoweth. And she studied a bunch of social movements in American history and throughout the world as well, like the anti-apartheid movement. And she landed on this, in terms of mobilization, she landed on this magic number of people that of a percentage that needs to be mobilized from a population in order to make sufficient change.
Okay.
Now, if you could guess what the percentage was, what do you think it would be?
27.
So specifically
40.
40? You?
I know it.
Oh, you know it.
Oh, yeah.
Ready? 3.5% of people. 3.5% of a
That's a
population
little.
needs to be mobilized in order to amount to massive change.
Oh my
3.5. So when we talk about crossing that threshold between conversations to actions, that's just the hardest work that we should be doing, because we know, literally now with math, that it's not that hard. And we can really, and that's what gives me hope, you know, like, we tend to read so many disastrous and horrible headlines in the news, whether it be the Amazon on fire, Australia on fire, or the ice caps melting. It still gives me hope that I sit in rooms with people like you guys who are ready to delve into the action. And if we only get 3.5% of people delve into that action, just imagine what we can do.
Yeah. And you know, one thing that, speaking of like galvanizing people and having these changes, Lina, the thing that struck me with you, and I was telling you this earlier, is that like you did a complete 360 on your life. Like, what a better example of someone that took something so close to your heart and you became a minimalist. You have this very natural lifestyle. And I really want to speak to that, because we're talking on a macro level, but on a micro level, again, these small changes, like, I understand that me not using a straw is not going to change the planet tomorrow, but you know, it's something. So I really loved your story and how you completely changed that, and I want you to tell us more about like what woke up in you, like what happened that you did this.
Definitely the birth of my son. When you have a kid, everything needs to be absolutely perfect and clean and green and non-toxic. So I started with a blog of, like, you know, the mom blog, the typical mom blog, everybody. And I was like, wait, there's something here. Like, I was vegan at that point. I had been vegan at that point for 5 years. I was vegan for 7 years, actually. I'm no longer. I don't want to get into that right now.
It's okay.
But it was definitely my kid, and having everything around him that was clean and coming from a non-toxic source was absolutely important. But it was as a process. My kid is now 5, so I've been doing this for 5 years. I didn't just like one day woke up and everything was, non-toxic. And little by little I did changes with avoiding plastics and learning about recycling a little bit, and how ineffective that was. And we lived in a building in Edgewater that didn't have recycling. And there's actually there's a code. The state of Florida has a code for recycling, ordering recycling for landlords, and it's required. So I delved into that, and I was like, yeah, I'm an activist, I'm going to change this. And it really started from there. It was like, there's more to do here. So avoiding certain plastics, avoiding certain textiles for my son, learning about cloth diapers and that sort of thing. And eventually, since we moved to a house, I started growing some food. It's definitely a very small patch, but we do grow some food there. And learning other permaculture things like native plants, and because they help the wildlife and the ecosystem that's around us.
I love
mangroves.
Yes, and
I love
well, I know you probably don't have mangroves in your house, but like I'm just saying, those are really good.
Absolutely.
Wait, what's the term? Permaculture.
Permaculture. Yeah, so permaculture is basically you're growing your own food, and that's like a self-sustainable.
Oh,
You know, so you don't have to
like
go,
living off your land.
right. And then permaculture is also like a system. So if you have chickens, the chickens kind of fertilize the soil, and then you have compost, and the compost you can use it for your plants, and then you save all these like scraps up from the foods, and then they go back into the land. So it's just like this circular, I guess. There you go.
Awesome.
Exactly. Oh, and the zero waste part has been kind of like a challenge, a personal challenge. I try to avoid unnecessary stuff, bringing my jars everywhere. It's definitely a mission because I have 2 kids. So aside from the things that I have to care for them, I care for my husband. I have like 4 water bottles and jars and cutlery and all these things, and all of that didn't happen from one day to the other. It was like a small change every day.
Can I ask you, in Latino culture, like, how has your family reacted to this? I'm just curious.
I frankly don't know because I feel like they don't know exactly what I'm doing. I'm like, what are you doing now? What is Lina doing now? But I think there have been a lot of changes, small changes. For one, I think my dad stopped buying like the plastic cutlery for like our meetings, and he's like, oh, put them there in a box because I'm gonna wash these. These are obviously, he brought his own, and I was like, whoa, that was like. But I think in Hispanic culture it's very difficult to do things like that because it seemed as if it was from a different or like a lower status. I guess in Colombia there's like statuses. There's 1 through 10 or whatever. So if you're 4, and if you're status 4, you're like the rich guy. So if you always want to, I think Hispanic culture has like, you want to perceive like you are this like high status person. So if you're seeing bringing your own straw and you gotta wash it and you got, it's like, we don't do that. We are posh, and we, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So in Hispanic cultures, it's really hard to get that point across. And another thing was using secondhand clothing. I am completely wearing secondhand clothing right now, and it's
I'm
my
gonna
jam.
geek out. I'm a huge secondhand clothing.
I'm
I'm wearing all secondhand right now.
Me too. Well, me too, except my like underwear and my shoes.
So now, like,
we don't promote that.
Thrifting is a trendy thing now, which is like amazing because like it's much more sustainable and people think it's cool now.
I was thrifting because I didn't have money.
Like that too. Exactly. Like I'm like, that's why I was doing it, but like, I mean, cool if everyone else is doing it.
But that's exactly what Hispanics maybe back at home, they're like, no, I am not buying pants that you sat on. Like, that's 100%. Crazy. So that part has been like, thrifting is the best, and also swabs. I like
Talk
clothing
about your
swabs,
please. Yes.
Clothing swabs are basically my middle finger to fast fashion. Like there is enough clothing. If you've been to a thrift store, there's enough clothing for everybody, even kids, especially kids. There's enough. Like there's enough. Not only that, but fast fashion just has this really poor effects, culture of they don't pay well their workers. They also use the cheapest of the cheapest things, the toxic of the most toxic things, and they don't care. It's all fossil fueled you know, if you will, as well, because they're using fabrics like polyester and you know, all these fabrics that are based off of plastic anyway, and it's just part of the problem. Fossil fuels, you think it might only be just like the gas in your car or the plastics. It's also like in our food, the way the food is packaged and what we're wearing, all the plastics that are part of our clothing.
So what happened at these swaps?
So these swaps, what we do is just, I host them. They're free. Anybody can come and bring their clothes and take as much as they want with them. It's not, you know, paid or anything. And my thing with that is that we can continue the circular economy of clothing. Like, if you know you're going to use it anymore, someone's going to use it, and then you already saved having to create a whole new garment from again, all these like processes.
How often are you hosting them?
I'm doing last year I did 10, and the last 8 were like the last 3 months of the year. So
whenever it just pops up on your IG? It just kind
of pops, and then maybe once or twice a month.
Okay, cool. Are you hosting them at any particular place or just wherever you pop up?
We're probably going to do it monthly at Nima Market in downtown Miami Shores. And there are going to be a few others for kids that are really also needed.
Awesome. Yeah. We have a few minutes left of the show. Can you believe that? It flies, I know. But I wanted to talk really quickly if there's other resources or other foundations, maybe other people that you want to shout out that are doing the work in our community as well, that you, aside from your own, of course, maybe people to follow on IG, or even if well, first, if they're from our community, let's shout them out first. But maybe there's also like people you look up to on Instagram or you follow that have really inspired you to get into this. So
Yeah.
I'll go.
our very own from the 305
I'll go on
by
a
way of
rapid
Colombia.
round.
Yeah,
I'll go on a rapid round. So we like at the Cleo Institute, we work with a broad coalition of different climate groups. It's not, closed off to anyone. You can only be part of it. No. So we work with Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion, U.S. Climate Strikes, 350.org, Sierra Club. I mean, just so many climate organizations that, whichever your heart rings to the best, you can join. But beyond that, I'd say that one thing that we didn't mention was, historically the climate movement, it grew out of Native American culture. The climate movement is something that is ingrained in the culture of Native American people who we stole land from, frankly. So if there's anyone that you ever want to recognize when you start working on climate, it is the Native American community. So please reach out to them. We have, many communities across Florida. Miami actually is the name of an old tribe, but I don't think that was frankly from here, but we have the Seminole tribe and so many. But yeah, I can't think of anything right now.
No, you think you need
Yeah,
them
but-
all. Gabby, did
Yeah,
you
I
need
mean,
any for you to name?
that's pretty much what I was going to hit too. Follow all of the local climate youth advocacy groups. I guess I'll hit them off again just in case anybody wants to write them down. But GenCLEO, which you could do through the Cleo Institute. So the Cleo Institute's Instagram and Twitter is at CLEOINSTITUTE. And then the website www.cleoinstitute.org. So that's GenCLEO, right? Those are our Cleo kids. But these Cleo kids work with so many youth advocacy groups in Miami. Fridays for Future, Extinction Rebellion,
U.S. Climate Strikes,
U.S. Climate Strike,
350.
350.org, and all these groups you can find on Instagram and Twitter, and we're all connected and we're all sharing the next opportunities coming up for meetings or strikes or any way that you want to get involved. And then there's also a lot of sustainable accounts that I like on Instagram that as they come to mind, I'll mention them.
Okay. And then, JP, what is your personal handle for people to follow you?
It's my Instagram. It's my name, John Paul Mejia, JOHNPAULMEJIA.
Awesome. And Gabby, yours?
Yeah, my Instagram is Gabby on Earth, so GABIONEARTH, and then I have a Twitter which is Gabby V Rodriguez.
Awesome.
One last thing.
Yes.
One last thing.
No, please.
It's 2020. Elections are coming around. If there's anything you do, vote for climate. Have that a priority when you vote.
Vote for your mother.
Yes.
Lina, give us your handles and the name of your blog and how people could get into more minimalism by way of you.
Thank you. So my account in IG is minima.lina. So it's like play with my name and minimalism. And I do minimalism because not only in an aesthetic way, is very much in like reducing your consumption and like all the taking that we as a culture kind of are brought up to do.
Yeah, awesome.
And I wanted to share something about Cleo Institute. I took the Speaker Network program, which is also free, and it's, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 6 weeks, and it's once a week that you have to meet, and it's not for the youth. I think it's for anybody.
Yeah.
We had a mom with like these teenagers like doing the class, and it was just like so refreshing to see all these like adult and older people taking the course to learn more about just climate change and climate advocacy as well.
And about the youth groups, is it closed off to a certain age? Like, what are the age requirements or no?
No age requirement.
So
So again, like
as long as
so
you
we
consider
call it.
yourself young, you're
Right.
welcome.
So when we
Amen.
say youth group, frankly, it's because it's led by the youth. It was started by the youth. But no, we have people in GenCLEO. We have teachers. We have parents. There's people of all ages, and there's no. I'm so glad you asked, because we definitely don't want the impression that there's a restriction, because all we're asking is for you to join.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what we want.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's led by young people, but it's not exclusive to young people.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this conversation that we had, and so important. So thank you. For anyone listening out there, please make sure you follow these accounts. If this inspires you, if you care about the earth, if you care about the youth, about your home, like, find out more information, hit up these organizations and give your time. Like, again, people think we have to have money to do certain things, but our time is the most valuable thing. Showing face, following through. If you have the privilege, if you can vote, then vote, you know. Gabby, you wanted to say something?
No, I just wanted to add to that list of things you were saying. Just have the conversation.
Yes.
Please. You can't give money, you can't give time, you can speak.
Yes.
Please
You
speak
can
to
give
the
lip,
people.
yeah.
You can give lip. Talk to the people, talk to your network about climate.
Yeah.
Whatever you know.
Awesome. For anyone listening out there, tune back in on Monday, February 10th for a new episode. Follow us on social media at Meet Them Mondays. I'm your host, Cristian Portilla, on IG at Room Free Rights. And just like they were saying, if you could have the conversation, you could share this episode with a friend, with your abuelita, with your mom, with your tios, with your side piece, whoever you want to share it with. Make sure that you all get educated on climate change. Hit us up for sponsorships and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or visit roamfreerights.com for more. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you all for everyone that
That was
tuned in.
so fun.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for everyone that tunes into the Facebook Live. I'm glad you had a good time, JP. We had an amazing time. The recording that usually happens. I'm like, don't forget. The recording will be out later tonight on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on the Facebook Live. Please follow these organizations. Like, this is for you. This is for us. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Jay, you could cut that video whenever you get a chance. And yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sweet.